Visual Studio. We're up to run the unit test, so we're going to give each other it's 30 minutes and 10-minute break. There's no breaks when you're studying at 4 a.m. Run the unit test to check that your unit test is working. From the menu bar, choose text. I just explained in the previous video. Some people don't want to watch it till the end. This is a computer reading. I just explained about SAT scores, life, Drexel, men, women, God, all of it in one sentence. You want to see my face? I look like I'm going skiing. Right? No, I just explained that the power went out. Somebody might have either hit a power pole or crashed a car or something. At least I had a backup plan. What if you couldn't flush the toilet? Run the unit test.
From the menu bar,
From the menu
choose
bar.
Test Run All Tests. The Test Explorer window opens. You should see that the test Get Current Data test passes. Tip. You can also open Test Explorer or be choosing Test Explorer from the menu bar. Project Properties. The line in the calendar.x file that contains the internals visible
Now you realize,
appearances, the assembly name
you're
or
looking at the menu bar and you say,
project.
The
assembly name
you press one menu bar, 25 items drop down. And then you press one of them, and then 5 more items drop down. So that's 25 plus 5 on one menu item. And there's menu items all across the board, plus thousands of files.
And select properties, or select the project and press Alt plus Enter. The property page S for the project open to the application tab. The assembly name of the Quick Test project is indeed Quick Test. If you want
an Indeed.
When you build
Why do you think they named the Indeed the website?
The resulting
Internet's
file changes from quicktest.go new name .dll. Related
DLL sounds important, right?
Work with and delete Visual Studio projects and solutions.
Feedback. Go ahead, send me some feedback.
Projects or solutions. Manage project and solution properties. Manage references in a project. Feedback. Was this page helpful? Yes. No. Ask the community. Provide product feedback. Features of Visual Studio. Article 10/22/2020.
Articles of the Union.
This article describes features for
Have you ever seen the actual Bill of Rights?
Who are already familiar with Visual Studio.
Yeah.
For a basic
introduction, it was either the Bill of Rights or the Constitution.
See the Visual Studio.
I've seen all the historical documents, either in person, online, or
in Visual Studio's modular installer. You choose and install workloads you want. Workloads are groups of features that programming languages or platforms need to work. This modular strategy helps keep the Visual Studio installation.
Yeah, it's about 25% done. So that's a quarter of the whole C++ manual. It'll still take you 2 years to do it, unless you have a team of developers. And then they'll still get it wrong. They'll bicker and moan, complain, say, I'm not doing that.
Visual Studio has a suite of tools to easily create Microsoft Azure cloud-enabled applications. You can configure, build, debug, package, and deploy Azure apps and services directly from the
I had to
Visual
supervise
Studio
all these interns.
IDE.
Every ethnicity I had to supervise. Every one of them.
Select the Azure development workload when you install
Every
Visual
one of them.
Studio. Important. The Cloud Explorer window
the person who took my place, when they saw me in person, they ran the other way.
Manage the resources associated with your Azure accounts in Visual Studio Cloud Explorer.
Yeah. He was embarrassed to see me in person.
Access Azure resources as necessary. You can continue to use the Azure node of Server Explorer in previous versions of Visual Studio.
I know it was him.
You can use Azure
he walked up to me. He took my place. He was a good person at one point to me. Then I realized I had bigger qualities. He used to sit behind me all the time. Then he turned on me. And then he saw me in person on the street, and he didn't like what he saw because I was in a different position, and he was coming to me for something which I was giving away for free.
By right-clicking the project in Solution Explorer and choosing Add Connected Service. On the Connected Services screen, select the link or the plus sign to add add a service dependency. On the Add Dependency screen,
And he had a
select the
name
service you want to add,
that was,
and follow
if
the
you
screens
said
to
it in
connect to your
English,
Azure
you'd think he was a
subscription and
piece of
service. For more information, see Move to the
nothing
Cloud
good.
with Visual Studio
His
and
name
Azure.
meant something in
Create web
English,
apps.
which was horrible.
Visual Studio can help you write apps for the web. You can create web apps by using ASP.NET, Node.js, Python, JavaScript, and TypeScript. Visual Studio supports many web frameworks, such as Angular, jQuery, and Express.ASP.NET. Korean.NET Core run on Windows, Mac, and Linux operating systems. ASP.NET Core is a major update to MVC, Web API, and Signal-R. ASP.NET Core is designed from the ground up to provide a lean and composable .NET stack for building modern cloud-based web apps and services. For more
I was telling
information,
the Lyft driver
see
about
Modern Web
a
2.0.
male prostitute.
Build
You know what a male
cross-platform apps
prostitute
and
is?
games.
Yeah,
Visual
they
Studio
have them
can
at the
build apps
hotel
and
right
games
over
for
here.
Mac OS, Linux, and Windows, and for Android, iOS, and other mobile devices. With Visual Studio, you can build .NET Core apps that run on Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. Mobile apps for iOS, Android, and Windows in C# and F# by using Xamarin. 2D
All your
and
worst
3D
fears?
games in C# by using
You know, girls
Visual
want male
Studio tools
prostitutes.
for
You know that,
Unity.
right?
Native C++ apps for iOS, Android, and Windows devices. Share common code in iOS, Android, and Windows
I had
libraries
some
by
girl
using C++
try to put on my
for
clothes.
cross-platform development.
It's
Connect to
disgusting.
databases.
I had to get.
Server
I'm like,
Explorer helps you
oh
browse
God,
and manage
she's
server
stealing my
instances
clothes.
and assets locally, remotely,
Can you
and on
please?
Azure,
He's like, oh,
Microsoft
just go put them in the
365,
washing machine.
Salesforce.com, and
It's disgusting.
websites. To open Salesforce.com Server Explorer, choose View Server Explorer. Explorer. See Add New Connections. SQL Server Object Explorer provides a view of your database objects, similar to SQL Server Management Studio. With SQL Server Object Explorer,
Want to
you
see
can
what I'm
do
going to make
database
next?
administration and design work. Examples include editing table data, comparing schemas, and executing queries by using contextual menus. To open SQL
Looks like I'm going to
Server
make a
Object
noose,
Explorer,
right? No.
select its icon at the top
No,
of
I have a
Server
specific
Explorer
thing in
window,
mind for this.
or select View SQL Server Object
Can't see what
Explorer
I'm
from
doing,
the
but I
Visual
know what
Studio
this is. It's
top
called a
menu.
clothesline.
SQL Server
I used to be able to
Data
hang clothes in
SSDT
this room.
is a
I'm not
powerful
going to do that
development
this time.
environment for
No
SQL
way.
Server,
I have
Azure
a
SQL
specific.
Database, and Azure
I have
SQL
something
Data Warehouse.
specific in mind.
With SSDT, you can build, debug, maintain, and refactor databases. You can work with a database project, or directly with a connected database instance on or off premises. To get SSDT, use the Visual Studio installer to install the data storage and processing workload. Debug, test, and improve your code. When you write code, you should run it and test it for bugs and performance. With Visual Studio's debugging system, you can debug code running in your local project, on a remote device, or on a device emulator. Step through code one statement at a time and inspect variables as you go. Or set breakpoints that are only hit when is specified. Condition is true. You can manage debug options in the code editor itself, so you don't have to leave your code. For more information about debugging in Visual Studio, see first look at the debugger. To improve app performance, check out the Visual Studio profiling feature. Visual Studio offers testing options like unit testing, live unit testing, Intel Lightest, endload, and performance testing. Visual Studio also has advanced code analysis capabilities to find design, security, and other flaws. Deploy your finished application. Visual Studio has tools to deploy your app to users or customers through the Microsoft Store, a SharePoint site, or install Shield, or Windows installer technologies. You can access all these options through the Visual Studio IDE. For more information, see Deploy Applications, Services, and Components. Manage your source code and collaborate with others. In Visual Studio, you can manage your source code in Git repos hosted by any provider including GitHub. You can also browse for an Azure DevOps server to connect to. For full details, see the Git experience in Visual Studio page. And, for a step step-by-step tutorial on how to connect to a Git or Azure DevOps repository by using Visual Studio C to open a project from a repo page. Tip: we continue to build out the Git feature set and iterate on it based on your feedback. For more info about a recent feature update along with a link to survey where you can share your feedback on it, see the multi-repo support in Visual Studio blog post. Optimize the Visual Studio experience on Microsoft DevBox. 7 Note: this feature is currently in public preview. This information relates to a feature that may be substantially modified before its release. Microsoft makes no warranties expressed or implied with respect to the information provided here. With Visual Studio 17.7 Preview 3, you can pre-generate Visual Studio caches and include them in your DevBox image. As a result, Visual Studio will load your solution and enable key IDE features faster on your DevBox.
Extend Visual
You can also
Studio.
improve the Git performance
See, it says
on large
Verizon.
repositories by enabling
It's just
Git
a jacket.
graph
I could write
optimizations
Mike on
in
there.
DevBox images. Extend Visual Studio. If Visual Studio doesn't have the exact functionality you need, you can add it. Personalize the IDE based on your workflow and style, add support for external tools that aren't integrated with Visual Studio, and modify existing functionality to increase your productivity. For the latest version of the Visual Studio extensibility tools, VSSDK, see Visual Studio SDK. You can use the .NET compiler platform Roslyn to write your own code analyzers and code generators. Find everything you need at Roslyn. Find existing extension S for Visual Studio created by Microsoft developers and the Visual Studio development community. To learn more about extending Visual Studio, see Extend Visual Studio IDE. Related content: Visual Studio SDK, Roslyn Visual Studio IDE overview. What's new in Visual Studio 2017? What's new in Visual Studio 2019? What's new in Visual Studio 2022? Feedback. Was this page helpful? Yes. No. Ask the community. Provide product feedback. Tutorial: create a simple C# console app. In Visual Studio,
Next.
Part 1 of 2.